Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 805A, and today's date is October 30th, 2015, and the title of this episode is Economic Bad News Continues as the Economy Slides into a Deep Depression. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. Tomorrow, Saturday, I'll be uploading an interview with Julia Turansky. She is from Brave the World blog. And if you are on the X22Report.com email alert system, you'll get emailed. If you signed up to the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel, you should receive an email from YouTube. If not, come right over to the YouTube channel, type in X22 Report Spotlight. It'll bring you right to the video. If not, you can come over to the X22Report.com site, scroll down a little bit, you'll see the interview on the right-hand side. Or if you're looking at the news site, which is newssentinel.com, you will see the video there. Let's get right into the economic collapse financial news. Now, the European nations, just a couple months ago, they were pushing the idea that they were in recovery, that their economies were improving because they saw their unemployment numbers go down a little bit. And they were saying that the economies of the different countries there were improving. They bailed out Greece and they said everything is fine now, which is furthest from the truth. And we understand they were manipulating a lot of the numbers to make that happen. And it's starting to look like the situation in Europe is starting to get a lot worse than they even thought was possible in such a short period of time. Because remember when the unemployment numbers went down to 10.9%? And they were all, yelling, "Woo, recovery's here. See, everything we're doing is working." Well, all of a sudden, the European Union Statistical Office pushed the unemployment numbers up to 11.8%. And this is a significant rise, and it shows us that the economy, the debt level, the people who are suffering, it's just getting worse, not better. And they can manipulate these numbers any way they want. They can try to convince the people, but the reality is the unemployment numbers will continually go up and up and up. Yes, they're going to try to manipulate them, but people realize when all the stores are closed and people are on the streets and can't find work, they know, they see it, they feel it, that the economies of the private Western Central Bank countries are falling apart. We are headed into a deep, deep depression, which is ultimately the collapse of the economy. Now, the University of Michigan consumer sentiment ticked up a little bit from 87.2 to 90. Of course, we're in the holiday season. People feeling a little bit better about themselves, saying, yes, I'm hoping things will get better. Maybe they took on that second part-time job to pay for some gifts. And this is the first bounce in 4 months, but we know this is not going to last, just like those part-time jobs during the holiday season. They only last for a certain period of time, and that's it. Now, from this survey, from the UMich, we're seeing that spending is non-existent. Consumers are waiting for prices to come down on products, and they're going to wait it out. And this is going to be a problem because as we get closer and closer to the Christmas season, a lot of people are going to take their spending money, their discretionary funds, and not spread it out as much as they normally do, which means the holiday season is going to be much, much worse. Now, we're looking at the employee compensation, and they told us that, wages are going to grow, everything is going to be fine. Just wait, you will see by the end of 2015, everything will be on track. But what we've seen is that wage growth is non-existent. September crushed the hopes and dreams of Americans as for the first time since July of 2013, compensation of employees fell month over month. And the only reason we're seeing compensation go up, it's because the government continually pays their people who are working for the government more and more money to keep this where it is today. But the private sectors, it's non-existent. Now, we're seeing personal income and personal spending, they've missed expectations and they have slowed dramatically. This is the weakest spending growth since January and the weakest income growth since March. So people are having a tough time continually saving. And we understand why. Because we've had so many layoffs, people are not working, and a lot of people have part-time jobs, and there's no money to put away. And if they're not out there spending, we know the stores aren't selling. This is why we see trucking slowing down, shipping slowing down. We see the raw materials that are delivered to the factories is non-existent. The Baltic Dry Index has dropped again to 721. And if they're not producing and the people aren't buying, where is this economy going? Nowhere, because the only way people can spend is if they have jobs, if they have good paying jobs. Because if they have a part-time job, guess what? They're not going to spend the money. They're going to just pay what they can and live day by day. And because of all this, the Fed has already been testing the atmosphere of the American people on how would they handle negative interest rates. Now, they do this in advance to set it out in motion to see how people are going to react. And remember, first we had the Fed official who hinted at NERP in September of 2015. Then in October, Fed President Bill Dudley saying, yeah, we should go with negative rates. We also have Minneapolis Fed President saying that, yeah, we should consider negative rates. And this is the Fed's war on cash. Because they thought if they kept interest rates at a low point, people, corporations, would take their cash and put it into real estate, into the stock market. But this isn't happening. And they realize as we get closer and closer to this collapse scenario, they can't allow people to take their cash out of the banks because they saw what happened in Cyprus. And this is why they're trying to ban cash. So what's happening right now is the Fed was blindsided because they didn't realize people would take their cash and they would purchase gold and silver. They didn't expect this. They were keeping the gold and silver market down on purpose, suppressing it for many reasons, but this was the biggest, to show people this was not a good investment. Do not put your money in gold and silver. It keeps dropping. Why would you do that? But people were continually purchasing. I mean, right now, the American Eagle silver bullion coin sales are headed to another year of record-breaking sales in 2015. I mean, if we look at the same point in 2015 to 2014, we see sales are at 38.9 million ounces. And if we look at last year's, it's at 38.1 million ounces. And if the trend continues right now, and we go out to the end of 2015, for this year alone, it will be 44 million ounces sold. And this completely blindsided the Fed. They didn't think people were going to do this. And this is one of their agendas of why they're continually suppressing the gold and silver, because they didn't want people in it. They wanted their money in real estate to pump up that bubble. They wanted people's money in the stock market to pump up that bubble. And we know from Overstock, they purchased like $10 million worth of gold. Overstock CFO realizes that this economy is an illusion. This is why they've been prepping with food. This is why they've been prepping with gold. They're taking precautions, just like you should be doing. The government's doing it. They're prepping for a complete disaster. The Treasury is keeping cash on hand. They've created their bunkers underground. NORAD is refurbishing Cheyenne Mountain to move into there, just in case there's an EMP or nuclear attack. They've been preparing and getting ready for a collapse of the system and going to war. This is what they've been preparing. And every single person needs to prepare. Do what they are doing. Get your food. Get your water. Get your supplies. Get a weapon. Keep cash on hand, gold and silver. Keep toiletries in the house. You can use lifereliance.com. You can get food, you can get bug out bags, water filtration systems, seeds. You can customize your order, and everything is prepackaged, ready to go. But if you are doing this, do not stop. Do not be fooled in what is going on here. It is an illusion. The market is not real. It is manipulated. And all we're seeing is continued manipulation. And when this manipulation gets away from them, the whole thing's coming crashing down. They will not be able to stop it whatsoever. Now, we understand the U.S. spends a lot of our hard-earned money in different countries. I mean, the U.S. spent $35 billion in global economic aid. And we're seeing that some of the countries that are receiving this aid is Israel at $3.1 billion, Egypt at $1.5 billion, Afghanistan at $1.1 billion, Jordan $1 billion, Pakistan $933 million. And of course they have this explanation of why they're receiving this. A lot of it's because of military. Wouldn't this money be better used here in the United States if we're having so many problems? Puerto Rico is in default because they can't pay their creditors. Of course, they're going to go bankrupt. They're changing the laws for that. The infrastructure here in the United States is completely falling apart. Don't you think the $35 billion would be better spent here on our own people, on our own infrastructure, instead of sending this off to other countries? But you have to remember, the central banks, they don't work that way. The central banks need to spread this out. They need more debt. And this is why they've been doing it. In Iceland, after the 2008 crisis, they jailed their crooked bankers for direct involvement in that crisis. And right now, every Icelander will receive a payout for the sale of one of its 3 largest banks. Now, because Iceland took control of their government, they effectively own the banks. And do you know that Iceland remains the only European nation to recover fully from the 2008 crisis? And Iceland even managed to pay its outstanding debt to the IMF in full. It's amazing when you get rid of the bankers and you take control of your system, and actually they're taking control of the creation of their currency, how much you can do, how much you can recover. I mean, this happened in Germany after the Weimar Republic and Hitler came into power. They got rid of the central bank. They created their own currency, and that's why it was called the German miracle. Bankers don't want you to know this, that if you get rid of them, your country does really, really well. And the people thrive in the country. The central bankers are the disease. We need to go to the heart of the disease and get rid of it. Now, out in the UK, the British people have a very tough decision, and they need to make this decision by the end of 2017. It's whether or not to remain in the European Union. Now, while the recent poll have those willing to stay in as the majority right now, there has been a spike in support for leaving the bloc. And U.S. Trade Representative Michael Froman said, well, wait a minute. If the UK decides to leave the European Union, the United States is not going to be happy about this. And if they decide to leave the European Union, the U.S. will threaten the UK with trade barriers. And we have to look at this a little bit closer because, remember, England has been working with the Chinese government. Remember, the UK and Beijing in recent months basically set up London as the city where to issue its first sovereign debt in renminbi. And they also set up a clearinghouse in London. So England right now is looking at this situation with the US dollar, and they are, of course, protecting themselves, saying, if we need to leave the European Union and we need to go and stay with China or work with China a little bit more, we're going to have to do this. And we can see right now they're hedging their bet. The U.S. is not going to like this, just like they don't like all the other countries doing this. And all the countries at this point realize that they can't stay with a currency that is continually failing. They all know it's only a matter of time before the dollar dies. And they're protecting themselves. Now, yesterday we talked about the IMF, how they're going to be changing their rules so Ukraine doesn't have to pay that debt back to Russia, the $3 billion. And we know the rule right now is that the IMF will not loan any money to a government that defaults on another government's debt. And they're trying to remove that, and the IMF will still give them loans even if they do default. Now, Russia is out there, and they're saying this is absolutely ridiculous, that now the IMF is changing everything to please Ukraine and to keep Ukraine alive. But they're not doing this for all the other countries. And Russia is looking at this saying that, yeah, most likely they're going to default on the debt. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.